Pokémon can't win. Well, except it already has. It's an odd stance that's simultaneously absolutely true and, on the other hand, not correct at all. A catch-22, if you will. In terms of market share and revenue, they've not only been winning, but absolutely dominating for 25 years. You probably know, but Pokémon, above Marvel or Star Wars or Harry Potter, is the highest grossing media franchise of all time. So if that's what we mean by win, then yes, they've absolutely won. But the responses to one tweet I saw just this last week hammered home the other end, an arena in which Pokémon will always be divisive and have an uphill battle for years to come. Let's talk about it. So this divisive tweet wasn't actually just a tweet, but a post of a fan-made recreation of a trailer for a fully 3D version of Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. This was made by @MillenniumLoops on Twitter, and you'll be seeing it here and there during this video. And like I alluded to before, this video isn't going to be me breaking down what's good or bad about that remade trailer, whether by telling Game Freak what they need to do because of how great that fan project is, or telling that independent creator how technically inferior or unlike Pokémon it is. But maybe you think one or the other of those reactions is fully warranted. If so, you may just be one of the comments I saw on that tweet that led to this conversation about the catch-22 Pokémon Company finds itself in regards to the quote-unquote pleasing the fans. In some regards, one segment of the Pokémon fanbase feels a lot like the Star Wars fanbase. Basically, it's said that you're only a Star Wars fan if you don't like most Star Wars stuff after like the first trilogy. But I don't think this is exactly the case with Pokémon fans. In the Star Wars fandom, it seems to be the super core audience that's really divisive, but then folks like me, a little on the outskirts, who generally enjoy the movies and get excited for them, just kind of roll with the punches, airing some grievances but leaving the rest at the door. But back to Pokémon. There seem to be a lot more layers of fans, I guess, and there's a large layer that the Pokémon Company apparently just can't seem to please, while the broader audience that includes newcomers, kids, and casual fans are happy to play the new game, trade some Mons, and let Porygons be Porygons. Furthermore, according to AJ, who has his pulse on the Pokemon community a lot better than I do, the super core competitive audience of Pokemon seems to be perfectly happy with Sword and Shield and seems to be treated pretty well. It's that middle group, that fairly large vocal minority of uppercase G gamers that claims to boycott Pokemon Sword and Shield despite its 20+ million units sold, and that just can't seem to be universally satisfied. But here's the thing, I kind of totally get it, because if I were just a little less aware of this whole thing, I'm the perfect culprit to fall into that mindset, and it's partially justified because, well, it's basically all the people who really connected with Pokemon as a kid and took away little differences of what that series meant to them. When you're playing Pokemon Blue, the superior Gen 1 Pokemon, on your Game Boy, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief. Firstly, the towns are top-down, grid-based towns. Compare this to the anime, a more realized representation of Pokemon. Ash and Co. are actually visiting, full towns, but suspension of disbelief. Pokemon appear from tall grass. Sure, that can happen in the Pokemon world, but generally that was a hardware limitation with a creative in-world workaround. Yeah, I guess you didn't see that Dodrio because it was busy crouching down for hours in knee-high grass just waiting around for you. Ultimately, it's nonsensical, but it was a good semi-canonical explanation for a Game Boy screen. And of course, turn-based battles. It's a series and RPG staple, but it's only a partial representation of the battle mechanics shown again in the anime. Yeah, Ash does tell Pikachu what moves to use, but he's never waiting for the other trainer to attack unless it's calculated for a reaction or for TV drama. But with Pokemon, these are just some of the main ways in which suspension of disbelief has been enacted over the years. The problem is that different people are tied to one or the other as an identity of the series. Luckily, this is adapting slowly over time, but I remember before I joined this channel and AJ suggested running into Pokemon in the overworld, not as random encounters from tall grass, and it was met with significant backlash, as if random encounters was the identity of Pokemon, not a means to an end. Similarly, turn-based mechanics are touted as the core of Pokemon battles, when we all know that's just not an accurate representation of the Pokemon world we see in the anime. Is it the best realized version of how to interface with the anime's style in a game? Maybe, maybe not. But no matter what the Pokemon Company does in their mainline games on a topic like that, they're gonna get backlash. And all of that is nothing to speak of the dichotomy of whether Pokemon is primarily a single-player RPG with some multiplayer as the post-game, or a multiplayer trading and battling game with a long story tutorial preceding it, or honestly anything else in between. The core identity of Pokemon is multiple different things to multiple different groups of people. But instead of just continuing down this road, let me come at this topic from another angle. Let's give a best case scenario for how capital G gamers would want this franchise to be reborn. We'll take Breath of the Wild. Its big achievement was taking dozens of years of evolution of a franchise, scrapping it, going back to the roots, and making something that embodied the original heart of The Legend of Zelda, but for a modern audience. And it took 6 or 7 years to make. So what if Pokemon wanted to do this? They go silent for 3 years, show a bit of the game they're working on, delay it again, and finally release a grandiose 3D open world Pokemon with every single Pokemon to date, a huge story campaign, the perfect combat mechanics, job systems, a beautiful art style, everything under the sun. I'm not gonna lie, that would be great. It would be a fantastic game tailored pretty specifically to me, and would likely be the first Pokemon game above a 90 on Metacritic, giving a whole new sense of respect to Pokemon games. It would be a prestige piece. But here's the thing, unless they do a full 180, there's a million reasons why the Pokemon Company isn't going to do exactly that. While they'd finally have won over one sector of the audience who feels entitled and semi-neglected, which I'll remind you, I can very much decide to find myself in on a bad day, this would ultimately be damaging to the huge audiences they consistently rely on that I mentioned before. Kids, newcomers, casual fans, competitive Pokemon fans. And even within this group they'd be trying to specifically cater towards, there's a whole host of different opinions, surely leaving some of that audience further alienated. I'm not saying that this game itself couldn't cater to kids, competitive players, and so on, but just to go silent for 6 years to work on it, that's the thing that's mostly damaging. So that's the way in which Pokemon can't win. Because of the incredibly varied expectations of the fan base, there's just no way to make everyone happy. But now for some good news. It seems more evident than ever that they are absolutely making some of these changes and basically going back to the drawing board just like we'd like. They're just not staying silent about it in the meantime. The Pokemon Company is building the train tracks just ahead of where they're riding. I think the best way to wow is to show the most progress all at once. But instead, Pokemon games are trying new stuff out as they go. Unfortunately, this takes away from the surprise when it's implemented to its full effect, but certainly not from its eventual quality. Incremental upgrades are less impressive, but not necessarily less effective. For example, if Pokemon Sword and Shield was the first game to feature roaming Pokemon in the overworld in the way that they did, I'm fairly confident it would have been received as a huge novelty and great press for the game. But because it was in Pokemon Let's Go first, it was bad press when it didn't seem to be there at first, and neutral press when it eventually was confirmed. But does that take away from its advancement in comparison to Pokemon appearing from tall grass? I'd definitely argue that no. Another example of these incremental upgrades are in the free camera that was only in the wild area in Sword and Shield, while the rest of the world was criticized for keeping a fixed camera. But then the DLC packs both had free cameras all the way through, but it just wasn't a big deal because it wasn't the first time that it was done. And I'm sure you can think of more examples of the same kind of thing. By contrast, new Pokemon Snap is getting fantastic press for how great it looks, which I certainly agree with. But if we'd gotten a Pokemon Snap every 3 years since the release of the first, and this one looks exactly like it is now, I can imagine people wouldn't be nearly as hyped about how great this game looks to be. Hopefully those points can drive home the idea that we don't notice incremental changes as much as sweeping changes, but what new Pokemon Snap and Pokemon Legends Arceus are hammering home is that the Pokemon Company is doing their best to test the waters just a bit more with every subsequent release. AJ has mentioned that, for example, he's hoping they're working on these titles to help build out a library of high-quality assets to reuse in future games. And looking at Legends Arceus, it definitely seems like that's already the case. But I do suspect that that game is a step towards the next generation of Pokemon, but it's not the next generation in and of itself. While on one hand, the Pokemon franchise is too big to fail, At the same time, it's also too big to allow itself opportunity to fail where it really counts. They can take risks with spin-off games all day long, and the well-received ones will find their way as necessary in the mainline games, but if they completely turn on a dime in the mainline games away from their cash cow audience, they also risk losing out in their anime, trading cards, merch, and everything else that gets funneled out of the games. So coming back to that initial tweet, should Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl look like the chibi square-by-square remake it will, or the full 3D Studio Ghibli fan trailer from Millennium Loop? Which one is truly Pokémon? To be frank, the polar opposite opinions of everyone in the comments tells me as much of the story as this whole video kinda did. There's no right or wrong, it depends on who you are and what you value about the franchise, and that's just not something the Pokémon company can exactly target all at once. But I'm thankful that over an iterative process in many games and many years, they seem to be doing their best to do so anyway. But that's what I think. What do you think? What's your favorite aspect of Pokemon? To you, is Pokemon primarily single player or multiplayer? Let me know all that and more in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, really do be sure to subscribe and like the video for more content like this twice a week and a podcast every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And some of the comments you leave, we'll take those and talk about them on that podcast. With that, see you next week. Peace and blessings.